Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today for another strategic chat with a communications industry expert. I'm Travis Clater. I'm the owner of TC Strategic Communications. And our strategic chat series brings two communications industry experts together to connect for a short, informal, but super informative discussion on a specific topic that provides meaningful and actionable information and takeaways for everybody. And today's topic is something I think we can all relate to. It's how to stay calm when the world around you is going crazy. Now, it's actually going to be a two-part interview where we'll focus on tips for both PR practitioners as well as business leaders in general. And our expert today is Noelle Fox, APR. Noelle is a longtime friend and colleague and the founder of the blog Peaceful PR. Noelle started Peaceful PR in response to the fast-paced, high-pressure world of public relations, which she has lived for about 2 decades now. She's worked in Major League Baseball, for county government, for an international nonprofit healthcare system. And in 2010, she actually started her own PR practice, True Blue Communications. She served, and throughout that time, she served clients in a variety of industries, including healthcare, commercial real estate, finance, and nonprofit. Huge resume and one of the smartest public relations professionals I've ever worked with. So, Noelle, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, lots to talk about today. And let's kick it off by just pointing out the obvious. It's a crazy time out there for everyone. But of course, today we're going to be focusing on public relations professionals in the PR industry. And PR related roles, sort of the joke that we always come across every year. PR related roles are always ranked among the top 10 most stressful jobs in the United States. And now you bring in things like the COVID-19 pandemic, responding to the Black Lives Matter movement, social unrest, and just general uncertainty in almost all aspects of our lives. And it's pretty safe to say that PR professionals are more stressed than they have ever been before. And it's more important, or I should say, it's important for us to be leaders in addressing all of the critical issues that are going on and helping our clients and organizations move forward as appropriately as possible. But at the same time, overworking to the point of extreme exhaustion can take a toll on our health and well-being just the same as it can everyone else. And when those things suffer, as you point out, so can the job performance. And because of all of that, having you on is extremely relevant and timely right now because this is something you're passionate about, right?
It absolutely is. Yeah.
So can you tell us, I know you have True Blue, but you started this blog, Peaceful PR. Tell us what all that's about.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So like you mentioned, I've been in the PR industry for going on almost 20 years pretty soon here. And between my own experiences and working alongside PR colleagues and commiserating with friends in the industry, I really know how stressful this industry can be, and from a lot of ways. I mean, we're managing clients and bosses. We are often, on 24/7. We're trying to juggle so many priorities. We're responding to the news media cycle and that sort of, 24/7 nature. And there's just a lot. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot we're juggling. There's a lot that we have to do, and we do have a responsibility to do our best and have a very important role with our organizations and with our clients. So, I actually got to the point a few years ago where I was in a position with my business and with my work where I really got so overwhelmed to the point where I was actually seriously considering a career change. I was just feeling this kind of all around discontent in a lot of areas of my life where I was having trouble sleeping. I was having trouble making exercise and healthy eating a priority. I was having neck pain to the point where it was really mostly caused by stress and a bunch of things like that. So it was really kind of all coming to a head at this point. And so I had to take a hard look at my work and my business and really do some soul searching to figure out whether it was possible to continue in PR and with my business in a way where I could sort of find that peace and that sanity that I was largely lacking. And I think that was a big part of what was causing so much consternation for me. So I decided that I could, but it was going to require making a lot of changes. And that involved everything from restructuring my business pretty significantly to introducing a bunch of productivity hacks, altering my client roster, streamlining operations, protecting my creative time and time that I needed to myself to, exercise and eat well and all of that. And some of the changes are really hard, and some of them were not necessarily very conventional, especially in our industry, but it worked. And I'm a much better place now than I was, back when I kind of hit that wall and really had to make some changes. So to go back to your question about peaceful PR, is the motto of the Peaceful PR blog and the social media pages is encouraging a more balanced lifestyle for PR pros in and out of the office. And it was really born out of that struggle that I went through, and that honestly I still go through, because life in our work is constantly evolving. And, I think in PR, we're always going to have to strive for that, sanity and making things as calm as we possibly can in a largely uncontrollable job that we do. But, Peaceful PR was a place I wanted to create where we could be honest about these challenges, and where I could share some of my own experiences, and in case they're of help to anyone else. And I do hope as well to eventually start sharing other people's experiences as well, because I come from a limited background of here's what I've experienced and what's worked for me, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. So I do plan on bringing in other perspectives, and so that hopefully, we all as an industry can address these stressors and figure out how to make them a little bit lighter for us.
Yeah, no, I think we can all agree we need less stress in our lives, or we need to figure out how to manage the stress in our lives, right?
Right.
And I'm assuming when you started Peaceful PR, you weren't expecting to be in the middle of a global pandemic and all these
No.
these issues that we're having to deal with right now as PR professionals. Right. So what have you seen, one, in response just to the creation and the messaging around Peaceful PR, but then certainly as it's adapted or we've moved into this very uncertain time that we're dealing with?
Yeah, it really drove the point home for me. So I started working on Peaceful PR around this time last year, not super seriously, but I started chewing on some ideas and really thinking through different topics that I could cover. And when and I started writing some things, and we're slowly working on the site. And then the pandemic happened, and I was like, okay, I think I need to add some blog posts on, pursuing peace in a pandemic, because it really was kind of a gut check in the sense that so much of what I was blogging about, what I was planning to blog about, really came into play and became even more important, I think, during this pandemic, because it just put a whole different spin and a whole new set of challenges on us that we deal with. A lot of what PR people deal with, and I write about this a lot, and we can talk more about it later if you want, is just the fact that we are on, or expected to be on, or we expect ourselves to be on and available 24/7. And, now that a lot of people are working from home that aren't used to that, it becomes even harder to shut down, I think, and to really delineate that work time from the personal time. And so the pandemic definitely put things into a little bit of a more almost dire perspective, given just that the more stressful things get for us, I think the more we do have to work to prioritize what we know will be the best for our health and well-being.
Yeah. So, and you brought up something that is new for a lot of people, but not so new for you, which is working from home. And you've been working from home for a while, just like I have. But again, it's new for a lot of PR practitioners, especially in-house folks out there. And we want to make sure we give people advice and tips on how to manage that stress and find that balance. And I want to use work-life balance because I feel like that's overused a lot, but that's kind of what it is. So what tips do you have for people, for PR practitioners out there, on finding that balance, but still ensuring they're meeting the demands of their job or their clients?
Sure. Yeah. And that's, I think, like you said, I've been working from home about in the last 10 years, probably 6 or 7 of those years. So I like it. It works for me, but I know it's not for everybody. And it is a big adjustment. Even if you do get to liking it eventually, it takes a while to get there. So honestly, my biggest recommendation, which is probably not going to come as news to anyone, because I think this is the general consensus, but it's to have a routine. And different people have different routines that work for them. And so I think finding that routine that works for you is really helpful. But for me, I think that having set work hours as much as possible, and whatever that looks like for you, especially if you have kids at home and things like that, it may not be 9 to 5, it may be a couple hours here and a couple hours here and a couple hours here, but having that set time, and then also a designated workspace if that's at all possible. And it doesn't have to be a home office. If it's just your kitchen table that's optimized for work or whatever that looks like to you. I think that having those set times and a designated place to work triggers to your brain, like, I am working now. And then when you leave, I am not working now. Like, I am on personal time. So I think if you can kind of set those triggers, that can help a lot. And going back to PR people, I think specifically, like we were just talking about a minute ago, I think we generally have trouble shutting down because either we are legitimately required to be available a lot, even in our off hours, and or we feel like we need to be available a lot. And those are two different things, because I think, you really have to take a hard look at how much of this am I doing to myself? How much of this stress am I causing? Am I really making myself a more effective communicator, or more effective at my job? Or can I figure out a way to do this where, I am still really effective, but I'm not driving myself crazy? So a couple of tips just for email, because I think that's something that is a big source of stress. I don't know if it is for you, but it is for me.
Always.
Just trying to
Always.
manage the inbox and all the constant requests. And if you're not focused, it can, you just go into this rabbit hole of trying to manage it all. So just a couple of specific, tips on that idea. This first one is probably going to sound really crazy, but you might want to consider removing the email app from your phone, because we are so, we have become so addicted.
Sorry, my heart,
to our phones.
I'm getting heart palpitations right now when you say that.
I'm going to give you another option that's not quite as drastic. But if you think about, how often, I think that I wish I knew the statistics off the top of my head, but I mean, it's like hundreds of times a day that we're checking our phone, right? And we do it without even noticing it half of the time. And I'm guilty of this as well. I'll be in the elevator. Let me check my email. Like, why? I don't need to do that, So my point is that if you truly don't have to be on your email all the time, consider taking off your phone, so you're not reflexively doing it without even thinking about it. And just plan to check your emails on your computer if that's an option for you. Now, the less drastic way, I think, to just slow yourself down a little bit to decrease that autopilot response is maybe to just move the email app to a later screen on your phone, so that you actually make yourself pause for a second while you're scrolling, and you might think to yourself, like, wait a minute, do I really want to go into email world right now? Because maybe not. So that's one thing just to consider. And then, I think that what it comes down to too is that we're probably worried that there's going to be something that comes through in our email that's an emergency, right? Like that somebody needs us to respond to right away, or the world's, about to catch fire. But I think that there's, a way to get around that a little bit. If this isn't already the case, tell your colleagues or your clients or your boss, like, if there's an emergency, call me. Like, just please call me. And that way, if you know that that's understood with everyone, then you don't need to feel like you're going to miss something in your email. So it becomes less of an emergency tool and more of a communication tool that we can use a little more at our leisure. And the last tip that I have on emails is to not send emails during off hours. So, when you send emails on the weekends or in the evenings, then it signals to people that you are working during those times, and you don't really want to be working those times necessarily. So I would say, if you have to get something off your chest at 10 p.m., then, draft the email, but then schedule it to send the next morning at 9 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah. So, and so much of what you're saying is, it's funny because we put it on ourselves. We put that pressure on ourselves, and it's easy to put in I shouldn't say it's easy. Technically it's easy from a tech standpoint. It's easy to put some of these things in place, but mentally it's such a difficult thing to do. We put all the pressure on ourselves to be available, to perform better. Like it's something that certainly in PR professionals, we want to be accessible all the time. So much of our success depends on producing those results. We feel like we have to be constantly working. And I've had some discussions with colleagues recently about being more forgiving to yourself, right? And allowing yourself to not almost force yourself to do these things, right?
Right. Yeah, because I mean, I feel like, I'm speaking for myself, but I think this is probably largely across the board with PR and just people who are, high achievers anyway, is that we feel like the more effort we put in, the more that we're going to get out, which isn't necessarily the case, because if we're putting in the wrong effort, we're not going to get that back on the back end. So it's about putting in the right effort and thoughtfully putting forth effort that we, strategically think is going to make a difference at the end of the day, not just doing more for the sake of doing more so that it feels like it kind of creates this false sense of accomplishment, just kind of being busy and spinning our wheels if it's not on the right thing. So
yeah, and like
I
you
agree.
said, it's half the time it's a reflex, right? It's just something we feel
Yep.
like we need
Yep.
to be doing and should be doing. And
Right.
for me personally, I can tell you one of my reflexes is news. It's news consumption. I always feel like I feel like I need to be checking news all the time. What's the next headline? Opening up apps. I've tried to even force myself to move those apps, like you said, with your email icon, move those apps to like different folders on my phone, so I'm not checking them all the time. But I'm kind of addicted to it. But that may not be a good thing either, right?
Well, it's very similar to the email, and for me too. I mean, I don't know if did your new. I know you're always watching the news and stuff, but did you find your news consumption increased at all during like when COVID started becoming a thing in March, or was it kind of the same for you?
No, I've always been addicted to it. Yeah.
It peaked a lot for me because I was just so kind of like when a hurricane's coming, when you're just watching the news all the time, all of a sudden, which again is not that helpful. Like get your hourly updates or every 4-hour updates and move on. But yeah, I experienced with the news media intake the first couple of weeks of COVID. I just had the national TV news on all the time, which is actually unusual for me because I have mostly B2B clients. So I don't normally watch TV news. And a couple weeks in, I realized that constant stream of like bad and scary news was really having a negative impact on my mood. And I've read articles and research studies that have been done in the last few months about this, because a lot of people are consuming more news, and it's a legitimate psychological effect that it has on us for not the good. And so going back to what you had mentioned, I actually had to create some barriers for myself to eliminate that knee-jerk reaction to want to watch the news, where social media was part of that too, because I was getting a lot of news on social media and looking at what other people were saying. And so I actually deleted the social media apps off my phone. I know, gas again. Now, granted, I will say that my firm provides social media services, but I have a team member that helps with those. So I know she was on top of that. But I would check, my social media maybe once a day or a couple times a day on my computer, but I didn't want it on my phone where I could, look at it any time of the day or night. And my husband and I made a pact that we were only going to turn on the TV news, once a day for an update and this and that. And now, so I didn't totally put my head in the sand because I'm still doing what I needed to do as far as, my job. Like I had to keep looking at some newspapers and trade magazines and things like that to make sure that I wasn't missing anything big and that I was still effective in my job. But it was also saying like, there is no point for me to watch 10 hours of TV news coverage every day, hearing the same stories over and over, because it's only having a negative effect. So I know it may sound sacrilegious for a PR person to tell another PR person to limit your news consumption, but I will say limit your news consumption to the point that makes sense. Just be smart about it. So, take a hard look at what you really need to keep an eye out for work, and what you really need to follow, and just be a decently informed citizen, and then skip the rest.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are, I think you hit it on the head too when you said it's just the same stuff over and over and over. And the news cycle moves so quickly that there's very, very rarely there's something brand new that you need to be aware of that is breaking news, right?
Sure.
If there is such a thing anymore.
Right.
And you almost have to shield yourself. You don't want to build barriers between you and the world around you, but you have to shield yourself
You're right.
very intentionally and purposefully from all of that noise that's out there, and find ways to focus on what matters to you, to your clients, to the person, or to the organization you represent.
Exactly.
So, and like you said, there's so much negative stuff out there. And I've always said this, that PR people, and especially crisis communications people, are eternal optimists. And I know that sounds funny, but if you think about it, it makes sense. You have to be an eternal optimist to keep fighting the good fight, right?
Yeah.
But you have some tips on how gratitude can be used and kind of plays into that. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. So, in a time of so much uncertainty around COVID-19 and the unrest that we're experiencing in our country, I think it definitely can feel like there's a lot to be unhappy about. There's a lot to be upset about. There's a lot to worry about. And I think it's easy for the brain to sort of wallow in those negative thoughts and emotions, but practicing gratitude is actually proven to combat many of those issues. And basically what I mean by practicing gratitude is just taking the time to thoughtfully focus on the good things in our lives and our good fortunes. And there's actually a lot of research studies that show the many benefits of practicing gratitude. I mean, it increases happiness, it helps decrease depression, it can improve relationships, business and personal, which is especially great for PR people. It increases your ability to accept change, which is also extremely important, especially right now. And it can even lead to better physical health. So what's really cool about a gratitude practice is that it's free and it's fast and it's not difficult. It's just, again, a matter of setting the time in your day to spend 5 minutes, if that, 1 minute, 2 minutes. For me, I just spend a few minutes every morning writing down in my journal what I'm grateful for, like 5 things that I'm grateful for. I know a lot of that works for a lot of people, are doing that at night or doing that, in the morning and evening or whatever that looks like. But, it takes just a couple of minutes and it can really make a big impact. So I think at a time right now where there is so much negativity, focusing on what we can control and the good things that we do have can help sort of shift that mindset into a better space.
Yeah. And I mean, so help me dive in just a little bit more. Like the purpose behind this is to focus on the positivity or the positive elements in your life, right? It's to try and shield yourself from the negative things, but focus on what's really, like, I don't want to say what really matters, but what again, either what's driving your business, or focus on the productivity side of what you're doing throughout the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times I'll write in my journal, like, and a lot of times it can be personal stuff, but to me, like, I'm really grateful for my wonderful clients. I'm really grateful that my clients are their businesses are doing, fairly well through the pandemic and things like that. And it's also, it kind of helps you, put you in a better mood, I think, going into your workday, when you can think through, like, you know what, yeah, a lot of things are kind of crappy right now, but there's a lot of good things going on, and that improved mood and that good energy when you sit down at your desk is just going to help you be more productive and more focused, I think, in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I can tell you something that's worked personally for me. And it wasn't really my style, and I can admit this, it wasn't really my style, a few months ago. But even if it's just 5 minutes, nightly meditations, and it's just taking 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you have time for. And whether there's a million different apps out there or health and wellness resources, but meditation is something that has really worked to help me improve my sleep and improve my mental health and well-being, even just from a day-to-day basis. And it started as just one, and I'm like, oh, I felt all right. And then I did another one and another. And now when I'm going to sleep, when I'm laying down, I always have time for at least a 5-minute meditation.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm a huge believer in meditation, and I've off and on had a daily meditation practice over the last few years, and it just depends by the day or month how well I'm actually doing at that. And I'm actually in a current 30-day, I want to do it every day for at least 10 minutes program. So I think that meditation is one of the best ways to help train your brain to not wander all over the place. And I don't know about you, but I feel like my brain is all over the place like 80% of the day. And so to be able to sort of just not think about anything, or to focus on only one thing, or focus on your breath or whatnot, it just helps recenter me so much. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of meditation. Highly recommend it.
And it all comes back to being healthy, right? Physically healthy, mentally healthy, and all that builds in. We kind of talked about it earlier, but all that builds into, we have to be, as PR pros, at the top of our game all the time, and we have demands on us at all times. But again, that all starts with what you're doing at home. And right now, we're always at home. We're in quarantine. We can't leave. So what advice do you have for people who are looking to try and improve the healthier side of quarantine life?
Sure. Yeah. And I have to admit, the first couple of weeks of quarantine, I I was not well behaved. I was eating and drinking my feelings. I was spending way too much time on the couch. I was kind of a mess. And then I just woke up one day. I'm like, this is going to be, we don't know when quarantine is going to end. This is going to be really bad if I continue doing this. So I said, you know what? I have a little more time on my hands right now. Let me use this time for good rather than ill. So I kind of reshifted my priorities. But, I know quarantine has brought a lot of challenges and everybody is trying to do their best. But I mean, my advice is if it's at all possible to maintain or introduce even one healthy habit during this time, then definitely go for that. And I think for me, and again, this is probably not going to come as any surprise, but the three things that can have the biggest impact on your health and well-being, which then leads to your job performance, is getting regular exercise, getting plenty of sleep, and eating healthy. So what have you been doing for workouts from home, since gyms have been closed and now people aren't returning necessarily that quickly?
Yeah, it's been an interesting mixture of farm life, living on a farm and taking care of animals and laying. In fact, I have 20 tons of gravel sitting in my drive right now that need to be laid. And then we became we hit the timing on this right on the head. Last November, we became a Peloton family. So
awesome. Okay, good.
we have the tread and we have the bike. And I can't even tell you how many workouts we've done, but now because I have that, and basically what it boils down to, I think, is just accessibility, finding ways to make it accessible. Even it doesn't have to be the most expensive option, but finding ways to make exercise, or just activity in general, even if it's a walk, to make it accessible. And the more accessible you can make it, the more likely it is that you're going to do it. And I was, a few weeks ago, I read, at the recommendation of Jenny Dietrich, I read Atomic Habits. And that's one of the principles of Atomic Habits, right? Is making it accessible. If you make it accessible and easy to do, the chances that you're going to create a habit out of it skyrocket. And that's what we did, right? And all of a sudden we have the ability to work out or find that release and that physical ability to go out and get some exercise. We've made it much more accessible. So it's been a game changer for us.
That's great. Yeah. And I walk a lot. I'm not a runner, but I walk a lot. And there's a lot of great online programs that are really affordable or free. I use the Beachbody On Demand app to do all kinds of different workouts. And there's a great YouTube channel called Yoga with Adrienne that's free. And she has all kinds of great yoga classes. And so there's no shortage out there. The great thing with technology now is that we do have access to online workouts, home workouts, and stuff like that. So I definitely recommend those. And then real quick on the topic of sleep, because I don't know, you were just talking about sleeping and meditations helping you sleep and stuff like that. And, the best piece of advice I think I can give on better sleep is to have some kind of bedtime routine where you give yourself time to wind down, which it sounds like you're doing with the meditation. But I think, again, whatever that routine looks like to you, it just has to be sort of decompressing from your day. And again, putting up any kind of protecting yourself maybe from your email, your social media, your screens, like screens, TV and phones have a blue light that interfere with your circadian rhythm and keeps you awake. So there's like blue light blocking glasses you can wear, an hour or two before bed if you want to start kind of winding down. So I usually read fiction or even like poetry right before bed, because if I start reading nonfiction, I'm going to my brain's going to start going, and that's, just keep me awake. But there's just a couple of things that might work for people if you're having trouble winding down and going to sleep. So.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so many tips out there. So it's really about finding what works for you, but you have to take the initiative, take that step to go explore a little bit. And it can be something fun. Like I never thought I'd get into meditation, but I tried it just to see what happens. And there you go. Right. So finding what works for you. And like you said, there's no shortage out there of recommendations or tips to try and improve certainly your sleep, because that's where it all starts, right? So whether you have blackout curtains or the blue light blocking sunglasses or whatever, a million different tips out there. So you just need to go find them.
Yeah, exactly. I've tried them all. I've tried them all. As somebody who has trouble falling asleep and staying asleep, I've tried them all.
We'll get there. You'll find what works eventually.
I got it. I'm good now.
Awesome. Well, Noelle, thank you so much for joining us today. This is not the last conversation we're going to have on this. I know we're going to be back for another discussion, but I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
So, and we'll see everybody back for part two, which, the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for it, where we're going to translate some of these tips for business leaders and others outside of the public relations field. So for everybody tuning in, you can find additional strategic chats as well as other content, as well as sign up for our newsletter at tcstrategic.com. And we'll see you back again soon. Thanks so much.